In my Wine Collecting 101 video where I identify 12 wine collecting strategies, I emphasize the importance of having a diversified wine cellar. So in this video, I'm identifying 8 key categories of wine that you should have in your collection. I'm also identifying the regions from which the best expressions of these categories can be located, as well as providing some value alternatives for those looking for more cost-effective solutions. This video will be ideal both for experienced collectors looking to make sure that they don't have any gaps in their collection, as well as for people just starting out who are looking to build out their collection, who can use this as a bit of a shopping list or checklist of sorts. The first key category of wines for your wine collection is red Rhone varietals. And by red Rhone varietals, I'm referring to both Syrah and Grenache, and I'll take each of these in turn. For Syrah, you have to start with the northern Rhone region of France. This is the benchmark region for Syrah, and what many producers in other parts of the world strive to aspire to when they're making Syrah-based wines. This is undoubtedly one of my favorite regions in the entire world, and I think it's very, very important for you to include some exposure to the northern Rhone in your wine collection. Other places where you can find excellent expressions of Syrah include the Shiraz that's made in places like McLaren Vale and the Barossa area of Australia. You can also find excellent examples in Washington and the Walla area, as well as in parts of California. With respect to Grenache-based wines, we're talking about both Grenache individually, as well as in the context of Grenache Syrah Mourvèdre blends, so-called GSM blends. One of my favorite regions for GSM blends is Châteauneuf-du-Pape in the southern Rhone region of France. This again is one of my favorite regions and one that I highly recommend that you include in your cellar. The areas I mentioned in connection with Syrah, such as Walla, Washington, California, and Australia, also have some excellent GSM blends, but you may also want to consider Priorat. Priorat oftentimes has some Carignan mixed in with the Grenache, and these are also excellent wines and worthy of consideration for your collection. For those looking for a value, you may want to check out Grenache-based wines from Languedoc. Languedoc actually makes wines in much the same manner as Châteauneuf-du-Pape and the other areas of the southern Rhone, and yet these wines are much less expensive than some of the Châteauneuf-du-Papes, and so offer tremendous quality for the price. The next key category of wines to consider for your wine collection is age-worthy whites, and I've got about 7 of them for you to consider. I'm going to start with Alsace, France. Specifically, I'm talking about Riesling, Gewürztraminer, and Pinot Gris. There's excellent expressions of all of these wines made from top producers such as Trimbach and many others. These are age-worthy quality wines that are definitely a staple in my cellar. While I don't go overboard with the percentage, it is a treat to be able to pull out an aged example from time to time and share it with some friends. Another age-worthy white to consider is Austrian whites. Specifically, I'm talking about Grüner Veltliner and Riesling. The Rieslings in Austria are dry and extremely impressive and age-worthy, but I also really enjoy the Grüner Veltliner, and I found them to be extremely food-friendly. You just can't go wrong with Austrian whites, but they do fly a bit under the radar for some reason. So this is definitely an area where you can get some value. While we're talking about Rieslings, you have to also consider Germany. Germany has a number of both dry Rieslings and also some Rieslings with residual sugar. While I prefer the dry Rieslings, and these dry Rieslings can offer some of the most compelling values in the world of wine, the wines with some residual sugar make excellent food pairings for spicy foods such as Mexican, Indian, and Thai cuisine, and all 3 are something that I enjoy quite regularly, and they go extremely well with Riesling with residual sugar. Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley is another age-worthy white, and my favorite area in the Loire Valley for Chenin Blanc is Savennières. Savennières is known for producing exceptional white wines from Chenin Blanc that are age-worthy and will continue to gain complexity as they age in your cellar. Bordeaux Blanc is one of my favorite expressions of Sauvignon Blanc. Bordeaux Blanc has some lower-priced examples, but they also have some very, very age-worthy collectible wines, such as Haut-Brion Blanc. That's one of my favorite white wines in the entire world. Regardless of what your budget is, you should be able to find some expressions of Bordeaux Blanc that would be appropriate for your wine collection. Condrieu is also one of my favorites. Condrieu is Viognier from the northern Rhone region of France, and I enjoy this wine with between 5 and 8 years of age on it. It doesn't really age well longer than that because it's naturally low in acid, but especially if you get some top producers such as Georges Vernet, you can get some tremendous examples of Condrieu, so this is definitely something you should consider if you haven't tried it yet. The next key category of wines to consider for your wine collection is Italian reds. When you're talking about Italian reds, you're talking primarily about Barolo, Brunello, and Barbaresco, the so-called killer bees. Of course, Barolo and Barbaresco are in Piedmont, in the northern part of Italy. These wines became much more collectible and appealing about the time that prices for Burgundy skyrocketed. And so at that point, a lot of people began to collect these wines, and the prices headed north for them as well. Nevertheless, there is still some compelling value, and there's certainly outstanding producers making both Barolo and Barbaresco. This is definitely a key component of most wine collections, and something I definitely recommend you have some exposure to. Brunello di Montalcino is another collectible, age-worthy Italian red wine that you should consider for your collection. This is an opportune time to be adding Brunello di Montalcino to your collection because the 2016 vintage was outstanding, and many of those wines are still on shelves now. These wines are showing beautifully already, but they'll just continue to get better with age, and it's definitely something you'll be glad that you purchased later on. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET, so I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, the primary grapes in Burgundy, are the next key category of wines to consider for your wine collection. Of course, for many people, red and white Burgundy are the highlights or crown jewels in their wine collection. Burgundy is available at a wide variety of price points. At the lower price points, you'll find appellation wines and village wines. For those looking to spend more and obtain some top expressions of Burgundy, there's the Premier Cru and Grand Cru. You may also want to consider wines from Sonoma, specifically Sonoma Coast in the Russian River, or also Willamette Valley, Oregon. I was just in Willamette Valley last weekend and was extremely impressed with the Chardonnay. Of course, they've had a reputation for making stellar Pinot Noir for a number of years. I found that the Willamette Valley wines are a little bit between both Burgundy and California. So they have a little bit more fruit than the Burgundy wines, but more acidity than some of the wines from California. So it's a nice middle ground. If you're looking for bargain Chardonnay, you may want to consider Kumeu River from New Zealand, as well as Margaret River Chardonnay, which certainly has some top expressions of Chardonnay. The next key category of wines to consider for collection is Champagne. And with respect to Champagne, the first thing that I'll recommend is that you determine if you enjoy aged Champagne or if you prefer the freshness and vibrancy of youthful Champagne or Champagne that was just released. I've found that aged Champagne can be polarizing. Some of my friends think it's the best thing in the world, where others prefer the freshness and vibrancy of Champagne that was just released. If you prefer younger Champagne, then that makes it easy for you, as you just need to buy enough bottles so that you have some on stock for your current consumption needs. However, if like me, you prefer aged Champagne, then what I recommend is that you stock up on your top producers as those bottles are released, and then put a number of those bottles away in the cellar, and then just start doing that year after year after year. I've found that some of the Champagne in the secondary market is both extremely expensive now, and also has somewhat questionable provenance. So buying it on release and aging it yourself is definitely the safest and least expensive way for you to have some aged Champagne in your collection. For those looking for value alternatives to Champagne, I highly recommend Corponat Cava. I was just in Spain a couple months ago and was extremely impressed by the quality and the affordable price point of Corponat. And certainly Trento Doc and Franciacorta from Italy would also be appropriate alternatives. The next key category of wines for you to consider for your wine collection is Spanish Tempranillo. This could take the form of either Ribera del Duero or Rioja. I recently did a comprehensive video on Rioja, so I'm not going to get into too much detail in it today. But certainly one advantage of Rioja is that, especially from the classic producers, that wine has been aged at the winery before it's released. And so it gives you some flexibility in terms of being able to open it and enjoy it right away, or letting it continue to age in your cellar, where it will certainly continue to evolve with time. With respect to Ribera del Duero, the Tempranillo expressions from this region are more intense and concentrated than Rioja, and some of these are the most collectible wines in all of Spain, including the wines from Tempos Vega Sicilia. So this is definitely a staple in many wine collections, and I would recommend at a minimum that you have about 5% exposure to Spanish-based Tempranillo. The next key category of wines to consider for your wine collection is red Bordeaux Varietals. By red Bordeaux Varietals, I'm referring to Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. Of course, when you're talking about Bordeaux Varietals, you need to start with Bordeaux. Bordeaux has been on a tremendous upswing the last few years. With global warming, the vintages in Bordeaux have been increasingly consistent. Bordeaux has had a number of top vintages from 2015 to 2020, for example, and so you can get some compelling values and quality from Bordeaux during that time period. Another place for top expressions of Bordeaux varietals is Napa Valley. Napa Valley is certainly known for some excellent Cabernet Sauvignon, and they also have some high-quality Merlot. The Merlot is oftentimes available for very affordable prices relative to the Cabernet Sauvignon. When it comes to Napa, though, you do need to be a little bit more selective because there's not as much value in Napa Valley currently as there is in Bordeaux. When it comes to California expressions of Bordeaux varietals, I would be remiss if I did not mention Ridge Montebello. Ridge Montebello has been one of the top Bordeaux blends from California for many decades, so this is definitely a staple in my collection and one that I would seriously recommend that you consider. In the Tuscany region of Italy, you can also find excellent examples of Bordeaux varietals. Specifically, I'm talking about the Super Tuscans. While the Super Tuscans have gone up in price the last 8 to 10 years, many of the top examples, such as Sassicaia, Ornellaia, and Cellar, are available for much less than the top examples of Bordeaux varietals from places like Bordeaux or Napa Valley. For those of you who enjoy Australia wines, you'll definitely also want to consider both Coonawarra and Margaret River. These two appellations both make top-notch Cabernet Sauvignon. For those who are South American fans, you can't go wrong with Argentina Malbec, such as that produced by Zucardi. And certainly in Chile, there's top examples of Cabernet Sauvignon-based Bordeaux blends, such as those from Don Melchor and Almaviva. Another region I should mention is the Loire Valley in France. There's certainly outstanding Cabernet Franc-based wines coming from regions such as Bourgueil and Chinon. And so for Cabernet Franc fans, you'll definitely want to give those a try. If you enjoy New World California wines, but you're looking for value, you may want to check out Bordeaux varietals from Washington, as well as those from Happy Canyon, which is in Santa Barbara County, Paso Robles, and also Sonoma. Cabernet Sauvignon-based wines from those areas will be less expensive than those from Napa Valley. Another key category of wines you may want to consider for your wine collection is dessert wines, or a category that some people refer to as stickies. In my experience, however, these wines do not get opened very frequently. The most common use case would be a dinner where you're pairing a particular course such as foie gras with a wine like Sauterne or Tokaj, or perhaps if you have a cheese plate at the end and you'd like a Sauterne or a Tokaj to go with it. The great thing about these wines is many of them are available by the half bottle. This works out well both because it reduces your overall total expense for the wine and because a little bit of this wine will go a long way. For example, we've oftentimes split a half bottle amongst 10 to 12 people and even had a little bit left over. Besides Sauterne and Tokaj, you may want to consider Port or Madeira, or also Pedro Jimenez Sherry. I enjoy all three of those wines very much and do have some of them in my cellar. Now, I know many of you are going to say, well, what about Rosé, and what about Sauvignon Blanc, and some other fresh, vibrant white wines? How come you didn't recommend any of those for your wine collection? For non-age-worthy whites, I'll do one of two things. I'll either put a couple bottles in the refrigerator, or I also have a unit that holds about 18 to 24 bottles of wine that I keep in my kitchen, and which I can use for easy access to wines that need to be consumed in the near term. And that way, once I deplete those wines, I can just buy some new ones, and I always have some on stock, but yet I don't take up valuable space in the cellar with them either. If you're interested in more specific recommendations, such as particular vintages and bottles that fit into these categories, be sure to check out the links in the description below, as I provided a number of my videos with recommendations in those links. In addition, I know that I've thrown a lot of information at you in this video, and so for that reason, I'm going to put this entire list and some of the subparts in the description below as well.